That unlocked the core memory, didn't it?
This is the world of Pacific Rim, where big robots fight big monsters trying to invade the world, but we made massive robots that we can pilot to literally run them hands with Godzilla. Pacific Rim is a movie that to this day has an extremely solid fan base, mostly known for its larger-than-life fight scenes in Taiwan and their kaiju fights. This film has garnered a massive fan base that is still massive fans of this movie years after its release. If there's one thing that we can all take away from this film is, we all want to be a Jaeger pilot. Where would you rather die, boy? In here or in a Jaeger? But how? How would we know if we would make a good Jaeger pilot, and how do we get into the program? What are the parameters that would be met before we can suit up and enlist in the Jaeger program as soon as it becomes available? That's what we're going to be talking about in today's episode. In today's cult meeting, we are going to be talking about the Jaegers and how they work, what it takes to be a Jaeger pilot, and how the hell drift compatibility works. Jaegers are massive robots that the government issued out to the military to deal with the threat of the Kaiju invasion. These beasts were distributed all around the world to each of our countries so that they could defend themselves from the Kaiju attacks. It got to the point where in Pacific Rim 2, we get to see some people actually could make Jaegers of their own with the amount of parts that could be salvaged from the past battles. But if you're a massive fan of Pacific Rim, we all have a pact that is unspoken that we do not talk about the sequel. As the Kaiju War went on, Jaegers and their pilots became decorated heroes to the public. Celebrities, if you will. We all know the classics: Crimson Typhoon, Cherno, the GOAT Alpha, Striker Eureka, and the one, the only, the true GOAT of all GOATs, Gypsy Goddamn Danger. Outside of these Jaegers, we also have different Jaegers from each country, like Azure Defiant, which looks a lot like Optimus Prime for some reason, Idris Elba's Jaeger Coyote Tango, and one of the sleekest Jaegers designs out there, and we actually see them for like a split second in the movie, Tactic Ronin, just to name a few. These massive machines were defending our world from the Kaijus for the better part of a decade, but after the Jaeger program got shut down, there were only a handful left. We all know the story that went down there. When I first saw this on streaming, I fell in love with how the Jaegers moved and fought. They felt extremely heavy, as they should be, moved more like a machine than a human, because they should be. That's what they are. They are massive machines being piloted by humans inside of them. Just because they're humanoid shaped, it doesn't mean they should have fluent movements like a human. These massive hunks of metal caught the hearts of millions of people just by being so goddamn iconic and honestly very realistic. The engineering when Striker throws Otachi across the Taiwan Bay, and how Cherno Alpha cocks back their fists into pistons, and how Crimson Typhoon spins his lower half in a complete 360 to alley-oop Otachi into Cherno Alpha was amazing! These walking war machines are every teenage boy's dreams. And you gotta admit that you told yourself as soon as they announced a Jaeger program, you'd be the first one to line up to sign up, not to serve your country, nah, because these things convince you that you could throw hands with a kaiju. You never walked in a pool the same after watching Pacific Rim. But the big question is, if you do enlist, would you make a good pilot? We have to consider that even if you do get accepted into the program, you would still have to undergo the basic military training and combat training. Every pilot has to go through specific training course to be an effective pilot, and even then, it's not guaranteed that you would graduate from that class. Don't get me wrong, ROTC was already a taste of what it would be like to train in the military, but you need to consider that the fact that they aren't training you to fight people in this universe. They will be training you to kill massive alien creatures from the bottom of the sea, threatening our planet. They will teach you how to kill a kaiju the fastest, their weaknesses, and what each category of kaiju there is. I know they do the same thing in the military where they teach you how to kill a man the fastest and how to incapacitate a target when needed, but The scale of having to kill a man versus killing a kaiju is just way bigger. Yeah, there's whatever there. They'll teach you every fighting style under the sun to keep you alive in that cockpit. They will make sure that you come home with a kaiju kill count on your uniform, or they will leave you in that mech if you fail to do so. The basic training isn't the worst part. These pilots will have to go through simulations of actual kaiju fights. If they fail those simulations enough, they will be deemed unfit to be a pilot, because they aren't basing it off of pure fighting skills. They will be basing you and your performance off of your strategic planning and quick thinking skills. In a fight, there are things that you cannot predict, and you have to be able to react fast enough to minimize the damage on you and your Jaeger. Because the only thing that stands in between the country and absolute destruction is you and your Jaeger. If you cannot think fast enough, if you cannot think on the fly, and if you're too slow to react to a certain situation, that will tilt the scales into the opposing team's field. And in this universe, they simply cannot afford that. The Jaegers that are highly decorated in this universe are mostly piloted by military personnel. Because studies show that soldiers have such high intelligence, they would be perfect candidates to be Jaeger pilots. Take Cherno Alpha for example. They were assigned for perimeter guard for the outskirts of Siberia or the Siberian Wall. From what I remember, it has been safe for 6 consecutive years without any fault. Cherno Alpha was so dedicated to protecting their sector that they kept it safe for 6 consecutive years up until the Jaeger program got shut down and they got called in with the rest of the remaining Jaegers for one last attack on the Rift. Cherno Alpha is one of the last of the Mark 1s. This proves that it doesn't matter what Jaeger you have, as long as you have the combat skills and the quick thinking skills that Cherno Alpha has and how drift compatible their pilots were, it doesn't matter what Jaeger you're in, as long as you're effective at what you do, which, by the way, it's kind of fucked up in how they died later in the movie, but you know, that's a topic for another video. Maybe we'll talk about it later. Speaking of the Jaeger pilots, therein lies another problem that a lot of people overlook when they say they want to be a Jaeger pilot. To be able to pilot a Jaeger, you must have a co-pilot. Not just any co-pilot that would be randomly selected to you. A co-pilot that you will eventually link up with and quite literally share your mind with. But it isn't that easy. Pacific Rim has a term that they like to call drift compatibility, where each pilot has to have a strong enough bond with each other to be an effective brain for their designated Jaeger. Not only do pilots have to go through basic combat training and Jaeger fight simulations, but they will also have to find a co-pilot that they think would be drift compatible with them. There's an easy solution to this. You can grab your boy that you've been friends with since high school and blow through these training courses like it's on another Tuesday, ace all of the simulations, and whoop some kaiju ass. Or you could enlist with your partner and think that enlisting in the Jaeger program would be a good honeymoon and ripping open kaijus would be an awesome wedding plan. But then again, you have to consider the possibility of someone enlisting alone. If you're going to enlist alone in the Jaeger program, you will have to find someone in your battalion that is drift compatible with you. Considering majority of them has signed up with a co-pilot already with them, being an introvert Jaeger pilot just won't exactly work. For a Jaeger to be effective in fighting, the pilots need to have an extremely strong bond to where they're basically the same person. I'm exaggerating, but you get the point. Or better yet, as Raleigh and his brother could have grown up together. Been through enough to where their bond is strong enough to be Jaeger pilots via, I don't know, trauma bonding? But there have been some cases of drift incompatible pilots were able to link up, such as Idris Elba and angsty blonde Australian boy in piloting Striker. Not to mention Mako and Raleigh when they just met, but I guess it was first love in sight. I don't know, that part of the film was hella confusing because it basically forgot its own rule, and I'll leave the science to Roanoke Gaming for that. But let's go back to the question of this video. Would you make a good Jaeger pilot? Well, that depends on how strong your bond is with your co-pilot. If you're going to enlist with one of your closest friends since childhood and aim to whoop some kaiju ass, then I believe you'd be an amazing Jaeger pilot. Plan on enlisting alone and drifting with some rando you met in the barracks because you don't have anyone to drift with? I think there's some room for improvement and think you'd be an less than okay pilot, but another thing to consider when becoming a Jaeger pilot is the amount of loss that you are going to experience. What makes a great Jaeger pilot is being able to deal with the loss of a co-pilot. In the film, Raleigh lost his brother in a fight. With the kaiju we first meet, Swordhead. 5 years later, he's convinced to re-enlist and come back to Gypsy Danger because he is one of the few remaining pilots left alive. How'd he get back? He piloted Gypsy back from the shore alone out of grief, anger, and guilt, and pure determination. These emotions are going to be extremely useful and common to a Jaeger pilot, the deal breaker being how you handle the loss. It won't be easy, of course, but what you do afterwards is what will determine your status as a Jaeger pilot. If you're a one-and-done pilot who wants to retire after your co-pilot dies, then you, my sir, are a good Jaeger pilot. Props to you. Medal of Honor. But if you decide to push forward and decide to keep moving on in honor of your fallen pilot, then that makes you a great pilot. Because not only are you continuing the fight in their name with someone you found compatible to drift with, you're also honoring them by defending the world that you two shared and saving it from the Xeno scum. Now, I did mention that it could be a little rare for one pilot to pilot a mech on their own. That's a whole different ballpark. It's a lot of science goes into it. I'll leave that to Rono Gaming, but being a Jaeger pilot isn't an easy process, and I believe fans overlook a lot of the time. It's not all about how good you are at fighting, but also how strong your bond is with your pilot, and how fast you can make decisions depending on the situation. Not just that, but you need to be emotionally prepared for the amount of loss that you are going to experience. The amount of friends that you're going to lose in combat, probably your co-pilot as well. If you have the qualities of someone who can make choices on a whim, or has a strong enough bond with your significant other to the point where you can work together as a team, and if you have the will to stand the amount of loss that you are going to experience as a Jaeger pilot, I believe you would be an amazing Jaeger pilot. But that's all I got for you in today's episode. What are your thoughts? You think you'd make a good Jaeger pilot? Do you think you have a co-pilot that you'd want to enlist with in the program? Be sure to let me know in the comments. Oh my god, what? Another video? I know, I have more time now, so that means I'll be uploading more frequently. But despite that, I still will be focusing on quality over quantity because I refuse to feed y'all slop. But if you enjoy, leaving a like would be awesome as it gets the video out there. And subscribing will help the channel grow as we are growers and not showers. That's all from your boy. I hope you have a wonderful day, and in case I don't see ya, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.